Juniper. He's an environmentalist and former executive director of Friends of the Earth. He's the author of What Has Nature Ever Done for Us? How Money Really Does Grow on Trees, What Nature Does for Britain, and Rainforest Dispatches from Earth's Most Vital Front Lines. He's also the co-author with the Prince of Wales of Harmony, a New Way of Looking at Our World.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say that in my long career as an environmentalist, I reached the conclusion that the question we're debating this evening is the most important of all, namely, what kind of economic system is going to enable us to navigate the climate change and nature emergency. And while many people talk about population growth and the fact that our numbers have tripled since 1950, bear in mind that the size of the global economy has increased tenfold. And the consequences of that we can see in elevated greenhouse gas emissions, the mass extinction of animals and plants, and ecological degradation on a global scale. If you look at the way different economies have greeted these trends over the decades, it's largely been seen as the price of progress, with both socialist and capitalist systems both seeking to expand output as the means of achieving human well-being. Both systems, capitalist and socialist, saw growth as their most vital and essential objective. One promoted the process via markets, private property, and corporations, the other via central planning, state ownership of industry, and workers managing the organizations that employed them. Both saw the rapid exploitation of natural resources as central to their plans to expand GDP. They both wanted to expand the size of the pie, with capitalists expecting the wealth to trickle down through society, and socialists engaging in more or less active redistribution. Looking at the last 100 years of economic experiments conducted under those two banners, it's fair to say that we have not yet invented a large-scale economic system that can be regarded as ecologically sustainable. And as previous speakers have pointed out this evening, this is now a matter of grave urgency. We have to shift from where we are to a sustainable economy in a matter of years. And as we consider the importance of urgency, just bear in mind that pretty much all democracies across the world vote for some kind of capitalist system, whether it's the socially progressive form that you see in some of the Scandinavian countries or the neoliberal excesses of the United States. Broadly speaking, that is what citizens back. If we are going to make this shift in time, then we're going to need to find ways of getting citizens to back that economic transformation in ways that they would like. And looking at the world from where I see it at the moment, it's going to be most likely to do that through some form of capitalist transformation, changing the system that we have rather than pushing it off a cliff. And if we are to succeed, then we need to harness the dynamic innovation of markets, of competition, and the inventiveness that comes with the profit motive. If we're going to do that, what kind of system might we envisage? So unlike the other side this evening, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you some solutions rather than simply a diagnosis of the problem. And it's not going to be a 5-year Soviet plan. It's going to be a 5-point capitalist transformation program. Point 1 in this transformation program is to adopt legal frameworks adopted by governments to embed hard caps to reflect the need to reduce to zero greenhouse gas emissions and to restore the natural environment. That needs to be done globally through the Convention on Biodiversity and the Convention on Climate Change, and domestically through things like the Climate Change Act and the Environment Act that was introduced into Parliament today. We need targets set out in law that reflect the scale of the ecological emergency. Once we've established the caps, we need to put in place the tools and the policies to meet those new goals. We can do this through the regulation on emission standards, through the regulation of the financial markets, supportive trade policy, and of course, in relation to climate change, a price on carbon. Imagine what would happen if over the next 10 years we introduced a £100 carbon tax per tonne. £10 a year, rising between 2020 and 2030, that would send a very clear signal that it's time to get out of fossil fuels. It would be transformative. And it could be part of a wider ecological tax reform program, whereby people on lower incomes have their income tax reduced, and instead we levy taxation on pollution and waste. 3 in this plan would be a shift of the subsidies regime. Been pointed out already quite rightly that hundreds of billions of pounds are awarded to fossil fuel corporations and industrial agriculture across the globe every year. We need to switch those subsidies into the cleaner and greener alternatives, sustainable regenerative agriculture, renewable energy amongst them. These 3 steps, hard limits, new regulatory tools, and reoriented subsidies, would ensure that the ultimate means of economic activity, namely a healthy biosphere, would be better protected. On top of this, however, it would also be necessary to correct the rather fundamental fact that neoliberal capitalism has lost sight of why it exists in the first place. This is why parts 4 and 5 of the transformation plan are about ensuring that capitalism delivers long-term well-being for all, rather than hoping that self-interested buyers and sellers will deliver that automatically. We know that they won't do. So part 4 would be the adoption of new measures to judge economic success, embracing human well-being and ecological sustainability as central measures of performance of the economy, not simple, crude GDP. That would be put into the dustbin of history where it belongs. Instead of measuring and celebrating increased consumption and waste, which is basically what GDP growth does, we would have economic measures to instead celebrate long, happy, and sustainable lives for everybody. Part 5 would focus on the private sector companies that are at the very beating heart of the capitalist system. They would be subject to new laws requiring that they be driven by a purpose to promote the well-being of people and society, not simply the interests of shareholders. Companies would still harness markets, profits, and innovation, but they would do it against a new set of goals that were set out in new company laws. They would still seek profit, but not necessarily profit maximization, nor profit via any legal route. Their purpose would be sustainable development. Governments can legislate for all of these things, and in different parts of the world, in different ways, they're beginning to do it. We need to put superchargers on that agenda, however. My argument this evening is not predicated on the view that it's capitalism per se that has caused the mess we are in, but rather the economic system more broadly, whether it be capitalist, socialist, or anything else that we've invented. We are very, very short of time. People want positive alternatives that they can vote for. Looking around the world at where people presently cast their votes, I would say the best chance we've got is to change capitalism, to invest in its transformation, not to push it off a cliff, because that will end in even more certain disaster. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.